Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review. I'm Asbed Bedrossian, and we're recording this show on Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. This week, Hovik Manucharyan and I will talk about the following major topics. Armenia under wide-scale attacks by Azerbaijan, and from there we'll segue into our originally planned discussion on border politics. Azerbaijan returns to the OSCE MG, and municipal elections over the past weekend.
To talk about these issues, we have with us Arthur G. Martirosyan, who is a senior consultant with CM Partners. In 1994, after graduating from Yale University, he joined Conflict Management Group and Harvard Negotiation Project, and has since worked on conflicts in the former Soviet Union, Middle East, the Balkans, Africa, and Latin America. Hello and welcome, Arthur. We're very happy to have you with us.
Hi, Arthur.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's a very distressing day. High level of casualties on the Armenian side. We don't know casualties on the other side, but presumably they are high too. Whenever one of the sides resorts to power, we in the field of negotiations understand that there was a breakdown in negotiations, and one of the sides decides that it can solve the problem the way it wants to solve by resorting to force, to power. So what led to this situation? We don't know much about what's going on in the negotiations between Prime Minister Pashinyan, his coterie, or the team, assuming several people in the team who are responsible for negotiating with Russians and Azeris. But we know certain things that can allow us, if not in detail, but then reconstruct the events that led to last night's and today's skirmishes.
For our listeners, just as a summary, around 1 p.m., Azerbaijan initiated a wide-scale attack. We have news about, as you said, deaths, at least 12 Armenian deaths and wounded. There are no confirmations about territories being lost, although earlier in the day there were some reports about 2 military positions.
No, there are. There is information. 2 important heights have been yielded
really?
to the Azeri side. Yes.
Is that officially confirmed by the Armenian government by any chance?
Well, that's what we've seen coming right now.
Okay.
The Defense Ministry, assuming it's again Artsun Hovhannisyan who will be the spokesman, but to the date they didn't have a spokesperson. And the major source of information right now is Nikol Pashinyan's newspaper. So it's kind of replaces the media. And even the public television and radio make references to whatever is published in that newspaper. So that's what we have. Well, here are some of the things that we know for sure that have been happening in the previous couple of weeks. It all started with a leak from journalist Tatul Hakopian, who on a website, I guess, based in Tbilisi.
That would be Alik Media, right?
Right. That's Arsen Kharatyan, who was a close associate of Nikol Pashinyan, and probably still is. I don't know. I don't know what the relationship is between them, but he's not in the official dome anymore. So anyway, the leak was about the upcoming signing of a new agreement. The Azeri media and Turkish media was speculating about the signing of what they were calling peace treaty. And essentially that information, although he didn't provide any further details, despite his promises, that information alone kind of created an uproar in Armenia. The opposition was mobilized against it. So on the 9th, they were preparing major protests, rallies, and other activities, which happened. And although Pashinyan himself was denying that any meeting is in the making, President Putin's spokesperson Peskov and others were talking about the meeting, at least online, in the week or in 2, that it will be happening. Now, it's only logical to expect that such a meeting was planned, because if you are ready to go for delimitation and demarcation of borders, if you go by international law, the step that precedes normally that kind of activity is mutual recognition of the states.
Right.
And we assume that most likely was on the agenda of that meeting. But because the mutual recognition spells imminent danger for Artsakh, some of the Pashinyan's associates, Rubinyan and others, were dismissing the danger for Artsakh, saying that Armenia has never had any territorial claims to Azerbaijan anyway, and it's going to be a matter of self-determination. But it's a really dire scenario for Artsakh, because if Armenia recognizes the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan de jure, it means that the next steps Azerbaijan is going to make are going to be further securing its own jurisdiction and its own sovereignty issues, both Westphalian sovereignty, which means no intervention in its internal matters, and from the international legal sovereignty perspective, it would mean that you recognize that Artsakh is part of Azerbaijan, and it sort of starts negotiation where it all started in 88, 89, right? Except that at this point, Azerbaijan has controlling positions, in much better position to put pressure on Artsakh,
right?
Because they control energy, water, a huge 75,000 hectares or 150,000 acres of arable land. And if Azerbaijan pushes that discourse to its logical end, the questions that may be put for legal discussions will be, what is your currency doing on the sovereign territory of Azerbaijan, Armenia? What is your, I'm not talking even about the military servicemen, what are they doing on my sovereign territory? Mm-hmm. And so on, right? So it's a very kind of difficult situation that Artsakh may find itself. And I think Pashinyan decided to dodge and to kind of get more time for himself. I do not rule out that this leak from Tatul Hakopian was done deliberately so that it creates some kind of opposition and uproar, and he can use that as an excuse to Putin and to Aliyev to say, see, I cannot do this right now, I need more time, so I need to buy more time, one. And number two, because we right now know that it was not just one document that was signed on November 9-10, there were also agreements on December 18th. They were not agreements written, but essentially there was at least a verbal understanding that Azerbaijan can take a swathe of land in Kubatli, Zangelan, in their terminology, that goes along the former Soviet administrative borders of the republics. Mm-hmm. And Azerbaijan took it as a promise or a commitment from Pashinyan that they can take. And that's why they had taken that 21-kilometer land and road. They had taken that, and they considered that Pashinyan promised them even more. I don't know if he had promised them that he would sign the peace treaty, but obviously if you are agreeing to delimitate and to demarcate borders, you have to make that kind of a move. It's only logical to expect.
Definitely, we will talk about the December 18 or mid-December agreements, but I wanted to go back to the leak by Alik Media and Tatul Hakopian. Mm-hmm. I believe Tatul Hakopian also talked about this charabastik in Armenian. I don't know what the English word is, like the term called the Zangezur corridor. Yeah, the unfortunate term Zangezur corridor, and I believe there was some mention of that as well. And do you think that this dodging by Pashinyan is related to actually, which one is more important in terms of strategic negotiation? Is it, the delimitation, the demarcation, or the corridor issue?
Now, it depends which side. I mean, for Azerbaijan, obviously, the issue of the corridor, and they have been using that term consistently, as well as Erdogan and Turkish officials, is much more important than the issue of demarcation and delimitation. But even more important for them is to fix the outcomes of the 44-day war, right? And by fixing that outcome, for them, the most important, if we put ourselves in Aliyev's shoes, for him, the most important issue is to get Armenia through coercion, through putting a demand that Armenia should not be able to reject, the recognition of territorial integrity and the part that I was talking about. Whether they had those kinds of commitments from Pashinyan or promises, we don't know. I mean, I don't know what was discussed there. But we know that that's the expectation of Azerbaijan. So when the meeting didn't take place, immediately on the next day, Azeris put the checkpoints and the customs, and so they locked the 21-kilometer part of the road, which means that the Armenians are not likely to be using that. Maybe others can, maybe Iranians can, by paying whatever the customs is going to be. Theoretically, as Armen Grigoryan, Secretary of Security Council, was saying, Armenians also can be doing that by paying whatever the dues are. And the Armenian side would put its own checkpoints, which means that if Azeris were to use it, they would need to cross through Armenian customs and checkpoints. So it's a kind of an issue that they were trying to, from my perspective, to obfuscate by saying that there is a great alternative road that we quickly built, and now you don't even have to worry about that 21-kilometer piece that Azeris control. But the real issue is, and the question to them was, why the territory was given to Azerbaijan if there was no delimitation and demarcation. If you insist that that delimitation is going to be based on the maps from 1920s, Soviet maps, why are you giving that territory right off to Azerbaijan? On what
and even
basis?
Worse, the National Security Service, Pashinyan himself, all like high-ranking officials confirmed that those territories on which the road runs go through Azerbaijan, which is mind-boggling to me. Why would you do that publicly?
Can they even do this legally?
I mean, legally, from the Armenian constitutional standpoint, obviously this is highly questionable. Because even if you are considering that land, and they are making references to some Soviet documents that no one has seen, that according to some Soviet documents that piece of land belonged to Azerbaijan.
Mm-hmm,
even
correct.
if that is true, once you enter the negotiations on delimitation and demarcation, you need to come to an agreement that that is the case. So that indicates that not only that part, but other oral agreements, and that's another statement made by Tatullah Kopyan last night when he went live on Facebook and spilled some beans about December 18, I think, agreement by which Azerbaijan was to take its full control that section of the road only after Armenia builds its alternative road, as if that were the agreement between the sides. But the question is, why do you agree to that?
Right.
The question is not. And one obvious explanation is that at that point you were too weak, and the other side was threatening to take it anyway by force. So you kind of agreed because you understood that you could not militarily resist if they were to advance militarily to there. So why escalate? And the other explanation is that the strategy that Pashinyan has announced is this era of peace in the region and whatnot, which makes very little sense for me, either theoretically or in practice. But he continues to talk about the era of peace and how he's inclined to be doing that. Now, if you are talking about peace, the other side takes that as your weakness. You are not talking about peace because you are strong. Mm-hmm. You are too weak, and therefore you are talking about peace. One. Number two is because Pashinyan in his strategy explained how Armenia's economic development now is pinned on the opening of communications. So that is going to give the Armenian economy a boost, and therefore Armenian negotiators, the vice premier and others, have been consistently talking about how good that is going to be for the country. Now, if you look at that from the other side's perspective, if I'm Aliyev and I'm hearing you say all those things, I understand that you really badly need the communications to open up. So, in other words, you are giving a leverage to Aliyev because he is less sensitive to the issue of opening those communications. Of course, they could benefit from it, but they have lived without it for some time now, and it's not like the economic development or political capital of Aliyev depends on a very swift resolution of that issue. No, he strategically goes after Zangezur. I'm quoting him. He calls that Zangezur. And as late as November 9th, when the meeting between the three didn't take place, he was in Shushi again, and he again repeated things that do not rhyme with Pashinyan's peace agenda. He said that Armenians were defeated and they should be stigmatized as the nation that was defeated for the eternity. Close to, this is not verbatim, but very close to what he was saying, and that the animosity to Armenians is not going to subside for what they had done in the past. So I don't know, when Pashinyan and his team have been talking about positive signals coming from Baku and Ankara, I don't know what specifically they were referring to. We live in a country now where there is no republic, essentially. Mm-hmm. There is no separation of powers, no checks and balances. There is no political recourse. Pashinyan may be saying anything he wants. Even if they ask him the sharpest question in the parliament, he still can give whatever answer he wants, and if the opposition is not satisfied, he couldn't care less. Right? So that's the situation where you do not have a political configuration which can force him to say where things are. I mean, he can do things whatever way he wants to be doing. And he stated that openly even before the war, that I'm negotiating any way I want, which is in stark contrast with what he was promising in 2018, that he would not make a single move without consulting with the nation, that Artsakh will be fully informed about what he's doing, and so forth. But back to where things were. So this is November 9 now, right? Azeris immediately react. No meeting, presumably with the issue of mutual recognition on the agenda. Therefore, they take that road. And then next thing we know, Pashinyan removes the defense minister. No clear indication of the reasons why he decided to do. It's a political decision, he says. My team has a very solid strategy for taking Armenia out of this crisis, and therefore it's better if Suren Papikyan now be appointed defense minister. Which makes very little sense, right? If I'm replacing my defense minister, I'd better explain. He either didn't do things that he was expected to do, or he did things that he was not expected to do. What is it? What happened? So we don't know, but we know that immediately after that, we got into these skirmishes. So the Azeri side also is following very closely what's happening in Armenia. They see that there is a new defense minister appointed. They know that Russia is sort of hands tied with the crisis in Belarus now and the Polish border with migrants. And they decide that we have the power, we're going to use it. We're going to take whatever we want to take because Armenians are not going to resist.
Right.
And maybe they miscalculated because originally it was going according to their plans because that's how they got Armenian prisoners of war now and met almost no resistance. But then something changed and there was a response and it was painful for Azeris, I believe, too. And finally, Russians have stepped in. This is the latest I'm hearing. There is no ceasefire agreement, but the hostilities have subsided. At least they are not using artillery. The sides are not using artillery.
What you mentioned about the defense minister is quite interesting because the 44-day war started when the defense minister of Armenia was out of the country as well. So it looks like indeed Azerbaijan is very sensitive and mindful of those issues.
Well, I mean, of course, I mean, again, if you put yourself in the shoes of the other side again, which any strategist should be doing, right? It's not a game of chess, but close enough. You want to understand how the other side is thinking about the timing. If they wanted to demonstrate force and take some more land under their control, this is good timing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you are kind of sending a softball to them, saying that, well, I mean, it's obvious that the new minister will need time until he gets fully in control of the situation, and and obviously the chief of staff is more responsible for the military responses and reactions. But you don't have a defense minister; it kind of weakens your organizational overall response to.
Or you have a moment of change, and the generals are thinking, who do we take the orders from?
Right. I mean, we just had this guy dismissed. It's an organizational not crisis,
flux.
Always a situation that is not clear about who is now going to be giving us orders, how it's going to be, what's the change. Everybody understands that if Pashinyan replaces and puts Papikan there, that he's going to be calling shots. But it's still, I mean, it's less than 24 hours, right? I mean, he doesn't, even the ink on the decree appointing him defense minister hasn't dried out yet. So that may have been a part of their consideration. I mean, I'm talking about Aliyev and the Azeri side.
Okay.
And also considering what's going to happen. Now, I'm following the discourse in Armenia, and this has become a very recurrent theme. Okay, we are now appealing to Russia and to the CSTO. It's now an attack on our territory. Stand by your words, by your commitments. You have to show that you are going to defend Armenia.
But as long as there's no border, who can say if that's Armenian or Azerbaijani border? The Russians definitely have an out there.
Sure, and obviously Russians don't want this to escalate any further, and they will do everything to hush it down. But now I'm talking now about something else. I mean, it's the part of the Armenian elites are saying, we're fed up with this Russian behavior. If they're not reacting, and these things are not on the Russian television, I haven't seen any Russian news outlets covering what's happening there. If they're not even reacting, even if they're not doing this and that, then we should be out of CSTO, period. We should demand and we should go where? International community, but who in the international community? And if they think that they're going to immediately obtain an umbrella, whether that's US or Western, French or any other, that will quickly replace Russians, they're just out of touch with reality.
They're deluded, right.
Even if they wanted that to happen, that's going to take time, and that is going to be plenty of time for Russians now helping Azeris and Turks achieve their goal.
Yeah.
And then it's going to be too late and too little for the West to come and intervene.
If they even want to do it at all, right?
Right, and from realist perspective, I'm asking who's willing to come and start a war with Azerbaijan to defend Armenia when they depend on their natural gas, oil, prices have soared. They have so many interests in Azerbaijan. I'm not even talking about Israel and Iranian angle. But Aliyev knows all of that. And he knows that you Armenians are just nuisance, right? I mean, and he shows consistently.
It's completely unclear to me, even if there was a will, how can France or the United States even have boots on the ground in the South Caucasus? How would they get there without Turkey?
I mean, if you ask people like Papian, he will say that in 8 minutes, Americans will be here, as he stated in one of his interviews.
All right.
But, so there are some, I mean, again, part of the Armenian elites believe in that. That is obviously nonsense. And the other piece related to this, and it's a bigger issue, is that I'm not ruling out that Russians are fully aware that this is happening, and they are dragging their feet for one obvious reason. And this is the reason. Pashinyan receives an invitation to participate in the Summit of Democracies on December 9. And the challenge for Armenia is that with your food that is responsible for your security, you are in one club, that's CSTO. And none of the countries in CSTO, Belarus, Russia, or Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, obviously have been invited to the other club, which is the Democracy Summit, and your other foot is in there. Moreover, the Democracy Summit, if you read some of the materials that have been made public, the biggest challenge to democracies that the US has declared is kind of taming the authoritarian regimes, and they specifically mention Russia and China. So if you're looking from Moscow at this development, and you see that the Foreign Affairs Minister of Armenia is in Brussels, and he again, although he's signing a very technical agreement on using skies and the air transportation, he does not miss the opportunity to reconfirm that Armenia is committed to the European values and is moving in that direction. Now, if you are looking at all of that from Moscow, you don't like what you see.
But Arthur, let me ask realistically, if Armenia was invited to this summit, I mean, this is a nascent club, right? It's not an alliance, the Summit of Democracy. Can Armenia realistically decline the United States on this? And what is going to be the outcome of such a summit?
Well, no one really knows because the organizers themselves, I don't think they know where they're taking this in terms of commitments that countries may be asked to make, what kind of alliance this is going to be. It's still premature to say what it is. But the very fact that Armenia is with Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine,
right,
and everywhere Russia has problems. Well, in Moldova, they sort it out with their natural gas supplies at a certain price, for now at least, differences with Moldova. But Ukraine, Georgia, and now Armenia joining that club. I'm not saying Armenia shouldn't be accepting it. I'm saying you have to understand how others are looking at this situation. So when Armenian political scientists and observers often say, we wanted and we expected that our relations with Russia would be the same that Israel has been enjoying with the United States, I'm always saying you have to be realistic. Imagine that in the year of 1965, in Israel, you have a group of socialists, right? Plausible. They were socialists, Israelis, and most Zionists were socialists anyway.
Right.
So, but a radical group of socialists says, United States, we're sick and tired of you. We now want to play with the Soviets because they are for the just and fair development and blah, blah, blah. Now, how would the U.S. React to anything like that? I think it would have been utterly impossible to even imagine.
Correct.
That any Israelis would have made that kind of a move. I'm not saying, again, that Armenia shouldn't be accepting that invitation, but accepting that invitation requires a very
nuanced approach,
diplomatic work, both in Moscow and in D.C. Lots of assurances that Armenia would not be taking any commitments that would undermine its relations with Russia,
right,
and so forth. I mean, I'm not saying they're not doing that, but we don't see any of that. And if we don't see any of that, it's problematic for the country that has its security dilemma in limbo. And we may end up in a situation where we do not really belong to either club. Not that I believe that Armenia is a full-blown consolidated democracy at this point.
Okay.
So Armenia is invited because there are other considerations that the U.S. has in this bigger game, in this bigger regional game. So I'm sure that Russians, given their proneness to overreact to such things, they've been making an issue out of the size of the U.S. embassy in Armenia. Imagine what kind of ammunition this is for Aliyev in his conversations with Moscow.
Right.
I'm not saying he's saying that exactly, but I would not rule out that something like that might have been pitched already to Putin. See, these are your Armenians, claim that they are allies, and they are joining now a club that purportedly and openly states that Russia, you are the enemy of democracy, and they're going to be working against your interests. This is a very, very dangerous game, but that they have also played, right on the 9th in Shushi, we had an Armenian killed. And I think that also happened a day after that invitation to Armenia was made. So Azeris again calculated that, yes, Russian peacekeepers, but we will find a way to tell Russians why they should condone whatever we did. And for them, symbolically, killing an Armenian on that important day for them, victory in the war, is understandable for their domestic and cultural reasons. So that's where we are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very complex game, and I don't see the Armenian side really being any close to mastering that response. And one of the problems is that Pashinyan and his government, as a leader, he is not capable of uniting the nation.
Yeah,
Even
absolutely.
now, they are calling for unity right now when the enemy is at the gate. right now, their statements in the parliament, we need to be united. The opposition has to set aside all their differences. We have one enemy, but that's kind of too late.
Arthur?
Yes.
We covered a number of the issues that I want to cover in the second topic. So let me segue into that if at all possible, because I want to talk a little bit about why Azerbaijan has come back to the OSCE MG table. Right? We talked about what the West can do and stuff like that. These are questions that I want to ask. But despite all of the rhetoric and the victory parades and everything, Azerbaijan last week essentially came back to the negotiations mediated by the OSCE MG. While Azerbaijan, while Azerbaijan claims that there's no more Nagorno-Karabakh, there's not a Karabakh problem, only Turkey and Azerbaijan have de jure subscribed to that view. But the US and France and the EU have been very vocal about saying that the status issue is not resolved. So can you talk a little bit about why you think that Azerbaijan would come back to the OSCE table?
It's not only the US and Europeans. Russians also want that set of negotiations to continue. Russians cannot accept that the status issue is resolved, because if it is resolved, then what the hell are they doing in Karabakh? So for them, it's important that the process continue, and they are willing to continue negotiations and drag those negotiations for as long as it's necessary. By just agreeing to participate in negotiations, it doesn't mean that you are accepting the status or whatever. The status can be within Azerbaijan. It doesn't mean that they have agreed that they're willing to negotiate status outside Azerbaijan. Not at all. There will be plenty of options from the previous process that will be put back on the table. The sides will be rejecting or accepting them. And Aliyev's calculus right now is very simple. I will be using that time to increase the Azeri presence in the area. I will build very quickly there. I will repopulate the areas. Meanwhile, I will drag on the negotiations on the status. I will be also using every leverage I have to make life miserable for Artsakh Armenians, so that they start leaving en masse, because there is uncertainty and they don't know what's going to happen. And meanwhile, by boosting my own presence there, I can come to a point where there will be more Azeris in the area than Armenians. And then I will say, hey, let's have the referendum that you were talking about. Let the referendum decide on where is Nagorno-Karabakh now. So that's his calculus. I mean, you're asking me why they agreed? My answer is, again, I'm putting myself in the shoes, how they might be thinking about it. That's their strategy, that's their thinking, and not only in Artsakh, but they are already thinking about repopulating, having Azeris return to areas in Armenia where before '89 there were pockets of very heavy Azeri presence. So they're talking even about that. Mm-hmm. Their strategy is obvious. The Armenian strategy is more than question. So if you have that kind of a partner, quote unquote, in peace, it's going to lead you to more losses and more challenging conditions for the entire nation on this territory.
In fact, 1 or 2 weeks ago, Arthur, when we talked to Benjamin Bogosian, he said almost identically the same thing, that Azerbaijan has very concrete plans to increase the population to possibly 50-50 by 2030. And Armenians have no strategy.
They don't make any secrets about that. By the way, I was in Artsakh several weeks ago, and I'm hopefully going to be able to make it there tomorrow. But from what I saw is obviously, and that's something that Azeris also observe, they know how many cars cross on that road, Berdzor or Lachin corridor. Mm-hmm. What's the activity there? They can see what's happening and the mood of the population in Artsakh. And they have clearly collected all sorts of intelligence about how specifically they may continue to make the life of Armenians miserable, with occasional killings of Armenians, as it happened on November 9th, with actions that would make the uncertainty even bigger for the majority of the population.
Yeah.
And I'll give you just one anecdotal piece. I mean, Russians, as was their practice in Abkhazia and South Ossetia, they started to distribute Russian Federation passports to
I remember that.
Armenians. And they stopped that. They stopped that because they saw that, unlike Abkhaz and South Ossetians, Armenians take the Russian passport so that they can move to Russia. And Russians are not interested in that scenario. For their plans, for their grand strategy, which is to continue to dominate in the region, to make sure that the US and European influence in the region can be minimized, they need Armenians on the ground there. Because, as I said, if Aliyev or the Azeri side achieves its goal, then there is no game plan for Russians to stay on. So they're interested in having their Armenian population. But at the same time, it's not like they're interested in Armenia's territory per se. They see Armenians now, and I know that may sound as kind of imperialistic and whatnot, but that's what we have in Moscow. They look at Armenians and they see them as nuisance. They really, I mean, they want our security, and at the same time they want to play with our adversaries or even enemies, any way you want to put it.
Since you mentioned that, let me just ask a tangential question then. I mean, I wasn't planning on asking this, but if Russia intends to dominate the region, then why do they play with these games with the Turks, with the 3+3, the corridor, which I think they officially are against the corridor, but they're obviously sort of sharing some power now with Turkey, as a result of war or any, other ways.
That's a good question. I mean, look, I mean, they are not against the corridor. In fact, if you read the joint statement of the 10th November 2020. It says, point number 9, the very last sentence says that it will be, the roads will be controlled by the Russian...
FSB.
They want to guard the corridor.
That's already a corridor. I mean, what's the difference between corridor and... It's again back to the issue of sovereignty. If the third party is controlling that, it means that you lose the sovereignty over that territory. Mm-hmm. Yes, we may say that it's Russians. What's the problem? Russians already control our border with Turkey. Russians are likely to control our border with Azerbaijan, at least for some time until we have our border guard troops. So what's the problem? I'm not saying it's a problem or not, but I'm saying you're giving them another lever of control. Right? Now, to your basic question, why are they allowing Turks to get their foot in the region? Because Turkey is more preferable for them than the US and Europeans. Because no matter what you say, but Turks are present in the region. Turks, unlike many others, are the only ones who are ready to commit to military operations. And they've shown that from Syria, northern Iraq to Libya and elsewhere. And plus, Russians have their short-term interests. They have contracts for the nuclear power plant, and Turks are now so excited about it that they want to build even more. We're talking about additional $20 billion. There is the natural gas flowing the southern stream. Look how much noise there is about the northern stream, right? With Russia kind of struggling to keep it going to Germany. But no one has made in the US the same noise about the southern stream that goes through Turkey. So there are also all sorts of other considerations that Russians have. But they believe, and I think that they're mistaken, but it's not like, I mean, it was up to our diplomacy to demonstrate to them the risks and the perils of this game. But they believe that they can take it and they will still dominate because they have so much more when it comes to the region than Turks. And this is a mistake because Russia is a weakening power and it has a number of strategic uncertainties, especially for the time after Putin. We don't know when it's going to happen, but there's going to be time after Putin. And I don't think the country is going to be ready to quickly reproduce the same style of governance as it has right now. So there are so many questions about the future overall, but I'm saying this is how they think. We may say they are wrong. We may say that it's even stupid, but it won't change the way they think unless your diplomats work with that and give them something that will show them that they have serious concerns. Yeah. And obviously that connection through Azerbaijan to other Turkic countries in the area, and even Russia's own Turkic regions, from the Volga, Urals, and even Siberia, should be a concern for Russian strategists. But it's a longer-term horizon, whereas short-term they have so many commercial and financial gains. Yeah. So what takes prevalence? Obviously the latter, not the former.
Arthur, first of all, we'll try and connect with you to get your firsthand impressions of what's going on with the people in Artsakh when you are there. But to close this section, I want to ask, under the current conditions, first of all, I completely agree that we've had a failure of diplomacy and we haven't been able to convince the Russians that they are in a declining pattern in the South Caucasus. But about the OSCE MG process that is afoot right now, what would be a success for us? What signs of success or even failure should we be watching for?
Well, I mean, for me, success would be if the Armenian side were able to negotiate the criteria for decision making. And from international legal perspective, you have to look at precedents. And both Russia and the West have set such precedents. The West has set a precedent in Kosovo. Russians have set precedent in Crimea. Now, they don't like Russians may not like what the West did in Yugoslavia. The West may not like what the Russians did in Ukraine, but that's the reality. So we need to come to an understanding that Artsakh and its self-determination is set in such terms that it cannot be part of Azerbaijan on a number of reasons. I mean, I'm not even talking about historic, I'm talking about humanitarian and moral.
Right.
If you found enough reasons to bomb Serbia and to give Kosovo its independence, even more threats on humanitarian basis are in the case of Karabakh.
Right.
And similarly with Russians, if you are considering that Crimea was the right move, or recognizing Abkhazia was the right move, and you keep saying that we are not recognizing Artsakh because you Armenians are not recognizing it, then the question would be, okay, if we recognize, would you? So in other words, I mean, can we see that kind of a process? And unfortunately, I don't see our current powers that be even looking in that direction. They want to close that page and move on to opening up to Turkey and kind of bringing peace the way they understand it in the region so that they can reap the dividends of quote-unquote peace.
Arthur, do you see the West supporting some form of remedial secession or a San Marino-style entity for Nagorno-Karabakh?
I don't, but you won't see it until you start working on that. Mm-hmm. It's not like, they're sitting there and saying, oh, wouldn't it be nice for Artsakh Armenians also to be granted this or that status? You have to work on that. And this is why we are not able. It's not just the diplomacy that is problematic in our case. Armenia has only one major resource that can make the political nation sustainable, and that is its human capital. Mm-hmm. And its human capital is in diaspora. Unfortunately, we haven't been using even, I don't know, I've been hearing different estimates, but I would say anywhere from 5 to 8% of the capacity that we have in the diaspora.
Yeah.
But that for that to be used, you have to have a vision, you have to have a strategy and a consensus around that vision, at least sufficient consensus among the entire nation. And when I'm saying nation, for me, it's not just Armenia and Artsakh, it's also diaspora. And it may go against the traditional understanding of what constitutes a nation state. But our condition is also not a very typical for what we've seen in the process of nation state building in Europe in the last several centuries. So we have to find very creative solutions to the ways for opening up the resource that we have. And unfortunately, it hasn't been done. We've been divided inside, already a problem for you as a negotiator, and we're divided outside, which is also even a bigger problem.
Arthur, I wanted to, before we close, I wanted to ask you a quick question about some local developments in Armenia with the municipal elections specifically. Over the weekend, I guess we had another batch of towns having municipal elections.
Yeah.
And what's noteworthy is that Civil Contract lost the elections in Sunik's Kapan city, but it won in Ijevan and Stepanavan. How closely were you following? The Kapan turnout was unusually high, which is noteworthy, while the latter two towns were 37 to 38%.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the local power dynamics, and do they have anything to do with at the national stage? Power at the national stage.
Well, I think Armenians in Kapan and generally in Armenia South feel on their skin what the current policies spell for them, right? I mean, they can see that. It is less obvious for people in Stepanavan. And Ijevan is the Pashinyan's fiefdom, sort of, right? I mean, they control too much there in terms of resources can be allocated. When people don't feel the security threat the same way, they obviously shift to considerations about resources. And both Stepanavan and Ijevan, they almost followed, although not closely, the pattern we had in the parliamentary elections last June. Whereas in the South, the outcome was even further against the powers that be. One other reason that came possible, I think, is the candidates who were running against the Pashinyan party.
Yeah.
Right. They disassociated sort of themselves from either Serge Sarkisyan's party or Kocharyan's party.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So in some ways, this is kind of a problem that played out in the elections in June, parliamentary elections. People thought the ones who gave their votes to Pashinyan's party in June parliamentary election, that's about 700,000 votes. I cannot say about all of them, but a significant chunk of those voters were thinking that it's better to stick with Pashinyan. He promises peace, he promises prosperity, and for whatever reasons, they believe that he's the man who can deliver that, whereas they saw Kocharyan and Serge Sarkisyan as probably the ones who are more likely to bring continuation of the war, which was a misperception.
Right.
And I'm not going to go into the reasons for that misperception, but it was existed, and the Pashinyan's party used that misperception to its full scale and limits. So there was this fear of the war, and he was coming in and saying, look, now I'm bringing you peace. Yes, there was a problem in Artsakh, but it was, it was a painful defeat, but it was not due to me, but to these plunderers and blah, blah, blah. We know his narrative, and therefore you don't have to worry about your sons anymore. They are not going to be going into the harm's way, one. And number two, there is going to be now prosperity. And they were painting this picture of open communications, trade, and lots of opportunities. And, most of these people want to be, I'm saying, not that he cheated them. They wanted to be cheated.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to believe. They want to believe because there is stress from uncertainty. And people, cling to anything that would give them some kind of belief that this is not going to continue, that this is this is our ticket, right, to get out of this. Again, I mean, we can talk on why and how anyone would trust Pashinyan after the number of times he broke his own promises. But that's how it works in politics now. You know, people have very short span, attention, and even memory span. And he's very good at manipulating things, at setting up people against this very painful memory that they have about the past.
Yeah.
They didn't have good lives, and they believe that it was solely because of the culprits, Serge and Kocharyan. That is not true. I mean, there were other reasons why that was happening, but again, it's a matter of perceptions, and that
perception is their reality.
Yeah.
So we'll keep watching this because there are further local elections in Armenia in December, I believe. So the show continues. Arthur, all right, that's all the time we have for today. We thank you very much for your time, and we hope to connect with you very soon again.
Well, thank you. I hope this was helpful in clearing at least some of the fog.
Very informative. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, let's keep our eyes on it. Yeah.
Okay, that was our Week in Review show, and we hope it helped you catch up with some of the issues in and around Armenia from this past week. As always, we invite your feedback and your suggestions. You can find us on most social media and podcast platforms or our website, groong.org. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, like our pages, and follow us on social media. On behalf of everyone in this episode, we wish you a good week. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.